If you're getting started on iRacing, it's often super difficult to work out what to buy. There are hundreds of tracks and more than 100 cars to choose from. It's really overwhelming. Today, I'll be going through some of my recommended cars and tracks, as well as some ideal career progression paths if you're getting started in iRacing. Let's do it. So iRacing's a great sim if you want to get stuck into multiple different kinds of racing. You can go down an open wheel path and try and be the next Max Verstappen, or you can go stock cars and try and be Chase Elliott, and much, much more. Today I'll be going through the two most common road career paths that I see on iRacing, both with open wheelers and also tin top GT cars. I'll be going through those career paths and suggesting what I recommend as the cars that you should be buying for them, and also some of the tracks that I recommend buying because you'll be racing them all the time on iRacing. If you find this list really helpful, feel free to leave a like. If you think we've missed anything, let us know in the comments, and as always, you can subscribe to Overtake for more sim racing videos. So I've sort of already touched on what cars and tracks you could be buying in my Is iRacing Still Worth It in 2023 video, which you can watch. And if you haven't picked up iRacing yet and you're unsure whether you should get started, I recommend watching that video first. iRacing's great in that you can try out a lot of different cars and tracks just with the rookie content, just with a base subscription. So that's what I recommend. Try out all the rookie cars before you start spending any money on DLC. So to get started, let's go through a standard open wheel career progression. And you'll be starting this one in Formula V or in the Formula Ford 1600. Once you're out of rookies and into Class D, you can either stay in the Formula Ford 1600 or you can move over to the iRacing Formula 4. And this car is kind of great. It has really healthy grids. It has wings and slicks, even though the wings aren't super effective. And it produces really fun racing. It's got fixed and open series to race, and it's always really healthy grids. I definitely recommend it. Once you're done with the Formula 4 and you've moved up to C class, you can buy the Dallara Formula 3. The Dallara Formula 3 is a Formula 3 car from a couple of years ago, back before GP3 kind of became the Formula 3 that we see today. And it's a really, really fun car to drive. I think it is one of the best balances on iRacing between aero and like kind of feeling the aero drop off as you slow the car down. And you can really feel this at some tracks. You'll often be completely glued to the track with full aero through the high speed corners. And then as you get to a hairpin or something slow, you'll feel the aero completely drop off and you'll be locking tires and really struggling for grip. This car is honestly one of my favorite cars in iRacing because of this. One of the downsides though with Formula 3 racing is that the racing is often a crash fest. If you can deal with being involved in a couple of crashes from people in the first lap, I definitely recommend picking this car up. I think it's one of the best on iRacing and I recommend buying it. Once you're done with that, you move to Class B, and here you get the option of the Dallara IR18 or the Formula Renault 3.5. So the Dallara IR18 looks a lot like an Indy car, sounds like an Indy car, but it's technically not an Indy car. But if you're into the IndyCar series, I recommend picking this car up. It runs on oval tracks and it runs on road tracks, so you can get a bit of variety. And I don't know, it sounds really good. It's got a lot of power, so you can get a lot of wheel spin. It's a really fun car to drive. The one thing to keep in mind with this car though is that the road series often struggles for participation, so you may not be able to find a race often in this car. So I actually probably wouldn't recommend buying it if you're, not super into IndyCar, but it's there as an option. The Formula Renault 3.5 is your other option in this class. And it's a really fun car to drive. It's got DRS, which is something cool. And I would say it's something similar to a modern day Formula 2 car that you see. Often these races don't go official like the IndyCar, which is a bit frustrating, but this car is really fun to drive. It's got a lot of aero grip, and I think one of the best sounding engines in all of iRacing. It sounds really mean and angry. So if you're into this, I recommend picking this car up as your Class B car if you can find a grid of people to race against. The final car in the open wheel progression is the Mercedes W13 F1 car, and it's a 2022 F1 car and it comes with everything that you expect from a modern day F1 car. It's got tyre compounds, it's got DRS, and it's got an ERS system that you can manage as well. This car has a heap of grip. It's really fun to drive. I think it's one of the most rewarding cars in iRacing to get right. One of the downsides is often the grids aren't super healthy as well because this is a Class A series. But honestly, racing an F1 car in iRacing is a really fun experience, and I definitely recommend buying this car. So we're done with the open wheelers, and now we're looking at the most common way of progressing through iRacing, which is using tin tops and mostly GT cars. After finishing up in rookies, which you'll probably be in the Mazda, you can move straight into the GT4 class. In GT4, you have a bunch of different cars you can choose from. Currently, the meta car, or the strongest car in GT4, is the Mercedes AMG. This car has a really good balance between straight line speed and cornering, and it's kind of generally good at most tracks. It eats curbs for breakfast. It feels like it has a really high ride height. Downside of that though is it does feel like a bit of a boat sometimes. Once you get past that though, this car is probably the fastest at the moment in GT4, so I recommend buying it. Once you're done with that, you move to Class C, and here the world opens up a bit more for you. You can race something like a TCR car, or you can race the Aussie V8 supercar if you'd like. What I would do in Class C though is buy the Porsche 992 Cup car. This car is raced in the Porsche Super Cup and in other Carrera Cups across the world. It is super fun to drive, and it always has packed grids on iRacing. There's always people racing it. This car has no traction control or ABS, so there's no electronics to kind of help you out. And in true Porsche style, it's got its engine right at the rear of the car, so it acts as a bit of a pendulum under braking. And if you get a little too aggressive on the exit of a corner, often it'll slide, and if you kick it sideways, it can sometimes be pretty impossible to save. So it's a bit of a scary car to learn, but once you get a head around it, it's really, really fun, and I feel like it provides a really good balance between kind of no electronics, but also feeling like a really, really modern race car. This car is also the official car that's raced in PESC, the Porsche Esports Super Cup, which is effectively the world championship of iRacing at the moment. So if you want to compare yourself to the pro drivers, this is the car to buy. Once you're done with that, you're in Class B, and here you get access to pretty much everything. What I recommend buying is a GT3 car, which is by far the most popular series of racing on iRacing once you get out of rookies. And what I would recommend with a GT3 car is buying one that's also raced in the IMSA Endurance series. My go-to car for this is the BMW M4. So it's front-engined, rear-wheel drive, and it's, I don't know, I feel like it's got a really good balance between straight line speed, but it also feels surprisingly nimble and quite kind of glued to the road. It feels really responsive in the steering. GT3 as a class is bopped, and some cars are really strong one week at a certain track, and the next week they may not be so strong. So the BMW is sometimes really, really good and sometimes not so good. I would say it's fairly consistent compared to the other cars though. Like there's not many tracks you'll go to that the BMW is terrible. It's always kind of okay. So that's why I recommend it. If you're not into front engine cars and you'd rather drive a mid-engine car, I would recommend the Audi R8 instead. So we've got all our cars we're going to be racing, but where are we going to race them? Well, let's look at some tracks. For starters, if we go to iRacing Buyer's Guide at irbg.net, we can actually see how often each track is being raced. And the number one track that's been raced the most this season is Sebring. Sebring is an extremely bumpy racetrack in Florida. It's a former airfield, and while there's no elevation change, the bumps are some of the craziest in all of iRacing. This track has a really good mix of high speed, kind of high load, high downforce, I guess, corners, and a bunch of low speed, really technical kind of hairpins and other things as well. I think it's got a really good balance. It produces really good racing. There's lots of corners that kind of go back on themselves, so you can have a little side-by-side action. And it's raced in all sorts of classes, from production cars all the way up to Class A endurance stuff. It also hosts the Sebring 12 Hour every year, which is one of the big endurance races in iRacing. So if you ever want to give that a go, you might as well buy Sebring. It's a challenging track, and I definitely recommend picking it up. Another track I would recommend buying is Daytona, and the reason for this is that it's raced in ovals and in road. It's also raced in the Daytona 24, which is the most popular endurance race on iRacing. This track is, I think, pretty much one of the easiest tracks on iRacing as well. So if you are new to the sim and you're struggling or you find some tracks a little bit too difficult, Daytona is super easy to get into. And you can also dip your feet into oval racing if you'd like as well. Another track worth buying is Spa-Francorchamps, which is arguably the most popular racetrack in the entire world. Spa is raced all the time on iRacing in pretty much every class, and it's got a heap of elevation changes and a heap of high speed but also really difficult corners. It's also got perhaps the most famous corner in the world, Eau Rouge, as well as other classics like Blanchimont and also Pouhon as well. The one thing I will say about Spa on iRacing is that it's a very old scan of the track. To give you an indication of how old, the advertisements on the side of the road are from a time when Bridgestone was still the tyre supplier for Formula One. That should give you an indication. But if you can get past that, the scan is still really, really accurate, and it's a great place to go racing, honestly. I recommend buying Spa. Well, hopefully there's a few cars and tracks there that you can think about buying on iRacing. Of course, like always, if you find a car or track available and you really like the look of it and you can afford it, I recommend buying it. The good thing with iRacing is that they put a lot of effort into all the content they produce. They only release like maybe 2 or 3 cars every couple of months. So each car and each track is meticulously worked on, and you can't really go wrong. So if you like the look of anything, buy it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a like if you did. If you think we missed anything or if you disagree with my list, feel free to leave a message in the comments. I appreciate it. Otherwise, you can subscribe to Overtake for more sim racing videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.